Vă mulțumim foarte mult. Vreau să invit acum și vreau să dau startul panelului numărul 2 și invit pe Victoria Bucătară, care va modera acest panel împreună cu vorbitorii Nica Alexeeva, Dmitro Potemkin, Nadine Gogu și Steve Swerdlow. De asemenea, vă mulțumim tuturor și în particular vorbitorilor pentru intervențiile care le-au avut în primul panel. Cu adevărat, accesul la informație rămâne o provocare în Republica Moldova, dar dacă tot vorbim despre politicile publice, anul trecut în Parlament a fost adoptat un document important de politice, anume Strategie de dezvoltare a sectorului mass media în Republica Moldova, care conține o foaie de parcurs a tuturor pașilor care urmează să fie Și acestea fiind spuse, vreau să dau startul sesiunii numărul 2. Victoria, ai microfonul.
Bună dimineața, good morning. As Tatiana already mentioned, my name is Victoria Bucătaru and I'm representing here the Foreign Policy Association of Moldova. And it is a great pleasure today for me to moderate a panel which is entitled Defending Digital Space Around Elections, Trends and Practices in Europe and Eurasia. I think we will continue our discussion in English, taking into account that the majority of my speakers here in the panel are English speakers. And with that said, I would like to introduce the panelists today. Our distinguished guest, Nica Alexeeva, Community Manager from the Digital Forensic Research Lab from Latvia. Hello. We also have with us Dmitro Potemkin, who is the founder and CEO of fakeradar.org from Ukraine. Nadine Gogu, an distinguished expert here in Moldova and the Executive Director of Independent Journalist Center for Moldova. And Steve Swerdlow, from Central Asia researcher from Human Rights our panel, and during 1.5 hours that we will have for this session, we would like to address several key issues which are related to defending the digital space around elections, and practically those issues that we will refer to will be the types of digital media which most strongly influence but also shape the political discourse online in our country, in Moldova, but also in other countries. Another issue that we would like to focus on represents the threats that the online environment and the digital media poses on the political debate, and this is quite relevant when we are talking about the experience of the Republic of Moldova, but also taking into account that Moldova already passed parliamentary elections on February 24th. But also what I think that it is important to tackle is also the stakeholders. So practically, we would also like to address the issue of the stakeholders who should have an impact or should influence the developing of digital media space, be it regulatory or not. And this is the issue that we would like to debate here. But starting our discussion, I would like to mention the fact that Moldova in 2009 actually got to be known as the country where the Twitter revolution took place. I'm not sure if we should talk about actually Twitter, because I'm not sure that Twitter was so popular in Moldova in 2009, but the idea, the general idea was that social media and the online platforms brought people in the streets to make a change, which actually implies a political change. So I think that the first questions that I would like to address to our speakers here would be actually what types of digital media most strongly influence and shape the political discourse online, and if you could refer also a little bit to the experience of your countries. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I have a privilege to speak about the Baltic region, the Eastern European part that is up north. So recently we redefined our geographical location and call ourselves like the northern part of Eastern Europe. The social media platforms that dominate in our region are Facebook and Twitter. Many think that VK is big. There was even a research, but the data was obtained in not really like precise ways. So VK is not as big. Facebook is a social media platform for the society to exchange opinions about social, economical issues. But I'd say that nowadays most of the younger population swing to Instagram and other like direct messaging platforms. Twitter used to be big, but now it's a place where discussion among political opinion leaders, like journalists, political candidates, or political scientists are discussing issues. So I'd say that Twitter is more like a lead-dominated platform where, of course, ideas of what should be discussed on mainstream media sometimes emerge. But Facebook is where regular people, I'd say, hang out. So these would be the main platforms. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. First of all, I'm very glad to be here. And I came from Tallinn, actually. So our startup is as much Estonian now as Ukrainian. And I'm surprised I was let in the country because my background is troublemaking. So I was coordinating the biggest US-funded project during the Orange Revolution in Ukraine back in 2004. So I'm twice happy here. Usually such people like me, they're allowed only into countries which are not afraid of color revolutions. Since 2004, I'm looking at the ways to fix things online too. And what we are trying to do is to use our best experiences from removing dictators offline into the online, because they moved online. The aim is using the online platforms, and what we are basically trying to do now is to just apply our best practices from the street, nonviolent resistance, into the online. And I think that there are two big issues with these attempts. All good campaigns, all good movements, they are fact-based. If you're trying to remove a dictator using lies, you're gonna lose. You can't build your campaigns even against the worst dictators if your campaign, if your movement is based on other lies. So you cannot address lies with different lies. That's how you can probably, well, fight for some time. Probably you can even remove a dictator, but then such a movement is more likely to become, backing the next dictator. So what we are trying to do now, and we are pretty successful in those attempts, is to bring fact-checking content from the professional fact-checkers, because activists, they're bad journalists usually. And journalists, they are not very good activists as a rule. They can't express their opinions, they can deliver facts, which is great. We can't change societies without journalists. But to remove a dictator, you need to be able to undermine his sources of power. And for this, you need campaigning. So you need good facts from fact-checkers, and fact-checkers are the best journalists. And then you need to be able to deliver those facts, provided independently, not because we want to remove something or somebody, but because these are just facts. And then we need to build campaigns based on those facts. So you need to be able to combine two things. First, good fact-checking, good data, independent data. non-biased data, and then to build an efficient campaign. And these things are usually done by two different people. Both of them are doing proper things. But these are two separate functions, and they cannot be combined in one entity. It's like editorial board in a newspaper and commercial director. They can't be the same. And commercial director can't come to the editor-in-chief and tell him or her what to write. So in democracy building, fact-checking and campaigning, these two things must be separated. But at the same time, online campaigning against disinformation, it can combine two these things, fact-checking and campaigning. So our tool is exactly doing this. We are taking content from the professional, independent, non-biased fact-checkers and trying to deliver those facts exactly to where those facts are needed, where fakes have been shared. And first tests are very good. We are happy people are installing our app. And it's going to be a movement. So it's going to be not just another fake detection tool, because I mean, we need not only to detect fakes, we need to debunk them. And that's what we're trying to do. And for elections, it's especially important, because you need to be able not only to document falsifications, you need to be able to mobilize people against those falsifications. And if regime announces results faster than well, the observers can announce those facts and deliver the action, because I mean, we know lots of OSCE reports coming, you know, 2 weeks after the campaign, but usually these are too late. So detection of falsifications must be on time, and people must act immediately. And if they're doing that, this can be efficient. Thank you.
If we can a bit address the issue of digital media, but also digital platform, because I know that in Ukraine you have specific policies. And if you could refer specifically to the digital media and the digital platform that are used in campaign, which mostly are influencing the public opinion, because you have experience in this.
Well, the thing is...
Klasniki is banned, for example.
Well, the problem is that, and now we are facing this problem delivering facts. First, we don't have enough facts. So fact-checkers are doing their jobs, but lots of things are not addressed by them. So we have nothing to deliver. We are only a delivery service. We are not fact-checking ourselves. So this is a great request for everyone in this room, especially foundations and embassies. Please help fact-checkers.
Thank you. Ms. Gogu?
Good morning, bună dimineața. Eu o să vorbesc în română. Revenind la impactul mass media sociale, în special când vorbim despre alegeri, noi avem câteva cazuri care probabil că unele din ele au să fie examinate ca și studii de caz în anumite manuale pentru a ilustra anumite situații cum nu ar fi trebuit să se întâmple, dar în general noi vedem în ultimii ani o expansiune a mass media online, a mass media sociale. Dacă ne uităm după datele statistice pe care le avem la dispoziție, s-au făcut sondaje în ultimii ani, inclusiv Centrul pentru Jurnalism Independent a realizat un sondaj, observăm că peste 55% din populație spune că se informează sau utilizează internet. Și aproximativ 42-43% dintre aceștia spun că caută pe internet, online, caută știri social-politice. De acolo ei obțin aceste informații pentru a se informa. Rețelele sociale s-au extins mult în ultimii ani. Așa cum arată statisticile, pe primul loc avem Facebook în Republica Moldova, urmat la scurtă distanță de Одноклассники, două rețele, care sunt utilizate la greu de către consumatorii de media și nu doar pentru o parte din ei accesează diferite site-uri, diferite instrumente, alții utilizează informația pentru a se informa. Și Victoria spunea puțin mai devreme despre revoluția Twitter, da, Twitter Revolution. Și atunci, și acum Twitter-ul încă e cât în urmă, deci pentru că primele două locuri avem Facebook, Одноклассники, după care vine Instagram-ul. Twitter-ul este puțin utilizat în Republica Moldova. Acum doar câteva cuvinte despre impact. Eu cred că unii reprezentanți ai breslii judecătorești, unii judecători din Republica Moldova, consideră cu fermitate că impactul este imens, ori altfel nu ar fi luat decizia care s-a luat anul trecut după alegerile locale anticipate din Chișinău, când o judecătoare a anulat alegerile, considerând că îndemnul unuia dintre candidați, dintre concurenții electorali, simplu îndemn către oameni de a veni la vot și de a vota pentru oricine crede ei că ar trebui să voteze, ar fi influențat rezultatele acestor alegeri și ar fi determinat câștigul. Da, este un caz, nu o să mă opresc la el acum în detaliu, s-a vorbit mult despre, au fost și reacții din partea organismelor internaționale. Eu pur și simplu fac o mică paralelă în 2016, când am avut și atunci cazuri de fake news, da, de știri false care au fost răspândite și o parte din reprezentanții partidelor politice, dar și multă lume considera că acestea ar fi determinate impactul alegerilor. Oricum, alegerile nu au fost anulate, nu s-a ajuns în instanță, deci situația este diferită de la caz la caz. Odată în plus demonstrează că avem ingerința politicului în activitatea curților judecătorești în Republica Moldova. Deci, nu e cert există sau nu există impact. Cel puțin în Republica Moldova nu s-au făcut sau eu nu am văzut rezultate publicate, da? Cercetări care au arătat că, într-adevăr, rețelele sociale sau media pot să influențeze într-o atât de mare măsură felul oamenilor de a gândi, încât peste noapte să dea certificat toate rezultatele. Nu există. Vedem mai departe ce se va întâmpla. Cert e că avem Facebook, avem Одноклассники, avem mass media online și acolo este libertate multă. Cred că în continuare o să ne oprim și la aceste aspecte, pentru că, da, sunt voci acum diferite, care unii pledează pentru reglementare, alții sunt împotriva reglementării, dar vedem schimbarea discursului în sensul ăsta.
Doamna Gogu, cu siguranță vom încerca să vorbim și despre acest aspect, dacă avem nevoie de aceste reglementări sau nu, care ar fi argumentele pro și contra, dar vă rog să transmiteți microfonul domnului Sens.
Good morning, thank you for having me. A big shout out and thanks to Mark, Gina, April, Lolita, the whole Freedom House team that invited me here. I'm going to be speaking about two polar opposites in Central Asia in terms of media freedom. And just to take a poll, quick poll, who knows which of the 5 Central Asian countries, raise your hand if you know, or shout out if you know which country actually rose in the media freedom rankings this year in Central Asia. I think I see one hand. 2. Which was it? It was Uzbekistan. How many people knew that Uzbekistan was the feel-good story of former Soviet space in 2018, 2019? I thought, I'd start off by trying to surprise you and, bringing these two examples. Obviously, Moldova is light years ahead in terms of where Central Asia is in media freedom, digital space, online expression. There's so many lessons that can be learned and shared and are important. But I thought, to just get right into the issue of the platforms and what's happening, and we can get to elections. Elections are, in my region of the world, in my patch, are a little bit secondary to the core question of the enormous repression and restrictions on online expression, digital space that exists all the time. And elections as such don't really exist in a free manner. What we have are very managed, orchestrated events. But we do have dynamism, and we do have the opportunity for real online activism to shape elections. I can get into that a little bit more, but to start to paint a picture for you, what we see in Uzbekistan, again, the polar opposite to Tajikistan. In Uzbekistan, we actually see an online environment that has become, since the coming to power of the second president of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, in late 2016, we've seen a very dynamic online environment emerge. We've seen ordinary Uzbeks calling out corruption uploading videos of officials doing all kinds of dastardly, nasty things, and then being actually held accountable. Child abuse in kindergartens, abuse in police stations, bribes, you name it, cotton fields, officials hazing people in agricultural sector. And those videos are leading to, in some cases, real accountability, people losing their jobs, which is was absolutely inconceivable 2 or 3 years ago in Uzbekistan, which ranked next to Turkmenistan among the most repressive of the former Soviet states. So Uzbekistan's freedom ranking has actually jumped up, I think, 10 points, maybe 5 points. We've seen, Instagram and Facebook are the two, I would say, most important platforms. And in a way, it's interesting. The online and the digital platform is part of the Mirziyoyev, the new president, it's part of his brand. They've put a lot of effort into talking about the e-government, the new period of openness, of reducing the space between the citizenry and the government by making officials online. You go to Uzbekistan and all of a sudden, now you're not exchanging cards with Uzbek officials when you want to contact them. You're actually getting their Telegram accounts. And Telegram is the way people distribute all information of importance in Uzbekistan. That's how you know how much access you have to somebody, if they're giving you their Telegram channel. YouTube and Facebook were unblocked in December in Uzbekistan, which is a very big deal. It's still incredibly slow, frustrating to get online and very difficult, but they were unblocked. Just days ago, we saw the former press secretary of the president and now the head of the Agency of Mass Communication unblock and put out in writing a statement confirming that my website, Human Rights Watch, along with Amnesty International and several other critical websites, maybe Freedom House, were unblocked. Again, this is being done in an ad hoc way. The internet is still blocked and still censored, but this is, again, quite amazing to see. What else about Uzbekistan that would be important to know? We can get more into the way people are harassed online and the way that affects civil society and elections. So maybe let me just skip over to Tajikistan for a moment. Tajikistan is the polar opposite. And in some ways, I find it interesting when you're studying repression. We often talk about how countries like Tajikistan, they need to, with relatively modest resources for their security services and their repression, they need to learn to punch above their weight. And the online sphere is one way that you can combat your government critics, combat your opponents at a relatively low cost. And we see a lot of doxing, a lot of trolling, a lot of harassment, a lot of really coordinated campaigns, and in many ways echo and mirror some of the Russian campaigns. We've seen the Internet Research Agency. We've seen a troll factory and an operation coming out of Dushanbe that is highly destructive for civil society. Tajikistan slid, I think it was 9 points this year on the Freedom of Reporters Without Borders ranking. And we'll get into what Facebook and other tech companies I think should be doing to engage with this. But it's a very concerning case, and we're seeing Tajikistan really spiral downward. And I should mention, of course, because I'm talking about Central Asia, Kazakhstan. Just in the last few days, we've seen dozens of websites taken offline, and that is obviously also in the context of elections. We see snap elections for the president being announced for June 9th, and a very concerning situation there for freedom of expression.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Sverdlov. I think I will pick up one of the words that you have mentioned, but also something from what Nadine mentioned, and trolling, but also regulation. So my next question will refer to actually what are the highest threats that the online environment, the digital media poses on the political discourse, but also what would be the means to address it? Because if we have practically a media which is an environment which is absolutely free, then how do we expect that we will face the outcomes of that? I think we have a microphone there. We have several microphones actually.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm doing digital research, mostly on social media, and one of the biggest challenges that I face every day when I research disinformation cases or just go and monitor what's What's new for, say, NATO Enhanced Forward Presence deployment in the Baltic states is, do I see the whole picture? And I guess that's the main difference of how online digital environments are different from traditional media. When we had printed press or broadcast radio, television, everyone saw the same content, while with digital media, with social media, everyone, first, we have more choice, therefore we limit our choice to what interests us the most or what we agree with the most. And second, social media platforms have created algorithms in a way that we start to see what we like. And the biggest threat is when something malicious are exposed to us. It means that this is what our online pack is seeing. This is what our friends, relatives, everyone that we are connected on social media sees as well. And it becomes as a status quo in our own social bubble. And people as pack animals, sometimes it's easier to accept what our community, our closest community that we depend on sees, rather than oppose we'll take opposing position to, say, some authorities in our pack, like our parents. Parents maybe are not the best authorities, but yeah, like opinion leaders who dictate. So I'd say that filter bubbles and the way they are created is the biggest difference and probably the biggest threat if we compare with traditional media that also has some filter, but it's editorial filter. And editorial policies are usually more transparent and better known rather than algorithms. YouTube, for instance, even YouTube employees don't exactly understand how it works and why would you see the content that you see online. So yeah, the algorithmic transparency, algorithmic bias sometimes is probably the biggest threat that we are exposed to on social media.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that the way out of those bubbles is actually those bubbles themselves. The thing is that we conducted a number of studies of how people behave when they learn that they shared fakes, for instance. And there are lots of interesting things. Of course, most of the users, they believe that they can detect fakes from facts themselves, only until they learn that they had shared fake. So we need to be able to help every user, walk that road and see whether he or she had shared fakes. And this is possible only, again, if you can provide them with the real non-biased facts on that exact fake that had been shared by him or her. And general perception of this problem is like, we think that, all those social platforms, they're terrible. We know they're evils. But we are sure that our part of Facebook and Twitter, they're fine. And you know why? Because we are selecting our friends. And every user can define who he or she is following. So we think that we completely control at least our part of the platforms. And of course, we trust our friends. Probably we have that aunt or grandma sharing terrible fakes and we're just reading because we don't want to lose that contact. But I think that we need to understand that this unwillingness to risk contacts, it works both ways. So our relatives, our friends, they just must learn that they can lose us as a contact if they will keep sharing fakes. So we need to help users to risk those contacts and to return them good quality data if they want to learn. And this must not be blaming, of course. We must help them learn. This is our role as citizenship. It's basically not about online. It's not about platform. It's if we are able to act as a civilized society, questioning bad ideas and helping good ideas and knowledge blossom. So it's basically, technically it's about, well, first mentioned getting quality data, but then helping people learn this habit of actually helping their contacts to learn more.
So
Thank you.
practically you are referring to the culture of digital space which we should put.
Well, it's
in
culture
force.
of good journalism. It's like, this is century old. Like, if you learn something from your friend, which is crap, and then you learn from a newspaper that actually that was crap, then what do? You tell him or her that, look, actually, no, that was not good. Have a look. I trust this newspaper. Please check this. So now it's just about bringing that online, because now online we have only those channels and bubbles for distributing crap. So we just have to, deliver quality data to these places.
So we're slowly going to regulations, but I would like to know also the following speakers.
Un apropo legat de algoritme, despre informația care ni se servește zi de zi, deci la care noi avem acces, și nu doar noi, dar toți utilizatorii, o simplă întrebare către voi. Câți dintre dumneavoastră v-ați văzut numele alături de un partid politic sau alături de un politician și Facebook vă informează că ați dat un like, vă place ceea ce faci sau ceea ce scrie politicianul respectiv? Puteți ridica? Puțin. Eu credeam că mai mulți, dar sincer, eu am văzut numele meu de câteva ori și numele prietenilor mei pe care sunt sigură că ei nu au dat like-uri la grupuri sau postări făcute de politicieni, dar nu știu de ce noi acolo apăream ca persoane cărora le place un anumit conținut. Deci am încercat să aflu, părerile au fost mai multe, până la urmă nu am înțeles cum se întâmplă acest lucru, dar cert este că se întâmplă. Și da, știți cum e vorba cu picătura chinezească, da? Dacă în toată ziua unei persoane îi se spune un anumit lucru, se repetă, la un moment dat persoana respectivă începe să creadă lucrul ăla care îi se spune și chiar dacă la început el crede că este un fals, la un moment dat o să creadă că este adevăr. Deci, dar asta este un pericol mai puțin periculos, ca să zic așa, legat de rețelele de socializare. Victoria folosea cuvântul troll puțin mai devreme. Am văzut multe cercetări făcute în afara țării legate de influența, numesc ei unii cercetători, fermelor de trole sau fabricilor de trole, care în timpul alegerilor din Statele Unite au lucrat intens și aceste fabrici sau ferme erau din Federația Rusă. Noi nu ne ducem încolo, în Rusia, pentru că noi avem fabrica noastră locală, avem multe cazuri în care observăm, chiar noi, cei din societatea civilă, apropo, așa, ca și azi, suntem la forum, ne expunem opinie pentru că e libertate de exprimare, după care observăm pe rețele de socializare că anumite personaje comentează felul în care am comentat noi, da? Deci și întotdeauna sunt aceleași mesaje transmise și înțelegem că sunt anumite persoane care au responsabilitatea de a urmări care reprezentanța ai societății civile, ce opinii au despre anumite subiecte și ulterior ei au grijă ca aceste opinii să fie anihilate, eventual prin diferite comentarii. Au fost cazuri din astea. Iarăși aduc un exemplu din acest an, în februarie, în campania electorală. Am avut acel caz, deci cel puțin în Moldova a fost cap de afiș, am avut multe știri, în acea zi când Facebook-ul, printr-un comunicat de presă, anunța că aproximativ 170 de conturi din Republica Moldova și mai multe grupuri de pe Facebook au fost închise, au fost blocate pentru că ei considerau că o parte erau false, altă parte răspândeau informații, deci erau anumite acțiuni orchestrate, le numesc ei, ce, ținând cont că eram în alegeri, ei au văzut asta ca o acțiune bine pregătită, planificată, cu un anumit scop electoral. Și au mai remarcat că o parte din aceste conturi erau înregistrate pe numele unor funcționari publici din administrație centrală. Sunt probe, deci ei au examinat, au monitorizat și aici, iarăși în apropo, s-au utilizat și datele de la aplicația Trolles, care în ultimii ani deci este populară, tot mai multă lume o utilizează. Asta e. Deci ne mai trebuie alte date. Am avut și replica guvernului care spune că ei nu controlează activitatea funcționarilor, ei nu știu ce fac funcționarii în timpul zilei de lucru. Asta e o reacție oficială. Dar asta ne duce cu gândul la faptul că se face acest lucru orchestrat, sunt anumite mesaje care trebuie transmise și transmite prin intermediul rețelelor de socializare pentru a ajunge la mai multă lume. Este clar, deci sunt populare aceste rețele. Eu nu exclud că în următorii ani o să fie mai popular online decât TV-ul. Și atunci politicienii, deci ei, fiind buni politicieni și având consultanți buni, încearcă să utilizeze la maximum această oportunitate care a apărut ca să ajungă la oamenii în care ei țintesc. Fiecare politician luptă pentru mințile noastre, ca să, în ziua alegerilor să aibă susținători. Deci asta e pericolul real.
Deci, practic, avem niște amenințări reale și cu siguranță trebuie să ne gândim cum vom apăra acest spațiu, pentru că dacă vorbim despre media online, atunci avem deontologia jurnalistică, iar ceea ce ține de rețele de socializare mai puțin. Trebuie să vedem cum facem.
Da, cum spunea un cercetător, când vorbim despre rețele de socializare, e un soi de monstru hibrid, că nu este nici media, nu înțelegi ce e până la urmă, dar cert e că multă lume se informează din rețele de socializare, deci ei acolo accesează sau informația, sumarul informației de acolo îl ia, nu mai ajunge până la prima sursă de unde vine respectiva sursă. E suficient să citească un titlu sau un lead dintr-o știre și merge mai departe. Mulți oameni se informează de acolo.
Mulțumesc.
Just going back to your question, so it's the threats in the digital space that are most threatening, most harmful to free speech. Just asking, just clarifying the question.
This is the question, right?
Well, no, I think it's really interesting that we're talking a lot here in your previous presentations, all three of you, about, in a way, online literacy, citizenry, and sort of the capacity for disinformation campaigns, sometimes coming from outside, sometimes coming from inside, to thwart, distort, and damage the media sphere, civil society. And I guess in my area, I'm still looking at ways in which the government in a more fundamental way is still just blocking the internet, for example. We saw a real threat to the internet in Tajikistan about 2 weeks ago. The government said they were going to raise prices about 20 times for people to just use the internet. And all of a sudden, in such a restrictive and repressive environment, we actually started to see online protests, some hashtag activism, online campaigns from inside, from outside, pushing back on this, and actually pushed President Rahmon to renege on this and not raise prices on the internet, even though it's still incredibly expensive, even compared to Kyrgyzstan, which is 20 times less expensive. So we still see the government, in a way, is still at the heart of, the government is the body that's leading disinformation campaigns. One thing that hasn't maybe come up in these presentations, but probably exists in all of our contexts as well, is religion in politics. And I find that really interesting in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. We see that the discussion about the role Islam should play in Central Asia, and I can imagine Christianity, Orthodoxy here, and sort of the separation of church and state and the role of religion and politics, that is being negotiated in a very sensitive way online. You've seen bloggers in Uzbekistan who start to talk about the role of Islam in society be detained. Last August, Facebook taken offline. And that makes the government incredibly nervous to see any discussions about religion, about Islam, and negotiating that balance as it affects security, it affects politics, it affects everything. But still, I'd say we have a sort of less sophisticated approach coming from the government in terms of their basic obligations to guarantee free expression. So, for example, in Tajikistan, a few years ago, but he's still in his same job, we had the head of the Agency for Mass Communication actually say that Mark Zuckerberg should come to Tajikistan and apologize for all the bad things that are being said about the Tajik government. And he said, I'm waiting for Mark Zuckerberg to come. And somebody actually played a prank on him. His name is Beg Sabur, the head of communications in Tajikistan, called him pretending to be Mark Zuckerberg. He believed it, and he was made a laughingstock, but there's no accountability, so he's still in that same job. But we have government officials taking that position and that line still in Tajikistan. Meanwhile, in Uzbekistan, we see, in a way, again, a real transformation just in 2 years, where government officials are really embracing the online environment. So I think everything that you guys are discussing in terms of disinformation and online literacy, though, becomes more and more important as Uzbekistan opens up. And it worries me because I've seen activists be targeted. There was one official that also started speaking about the problem of polygamy in Uzbekistan. And she incautiously referred to the Prophet Muhammad in her comments on Facebook. And within hours, she was inundated with threats, death threats, and many of them were emanating from accounts that appeared to be in Russia, which was very peculiar. There was a groundswell of opposition to what she said, but a lot of it started coming from Russia. So I think we're going to see that happening. Russia playing a very, very outsized role in a lot of these debates in Central Asia, online space.
Yes, please.
It's very interesting because, religion is a topic now, and you saw Mr. Trump meeting Mr. Orban today, talking they're gonna protect Christianity. They're on a new mission. And what they're doing, Mark is removing those discussions. He gets criticism from some Stani government. And then he looks like he is, bringing Western civilization to all those Asian states. That's the game. They themselves start this process. They remove the discussions from Facebook, okay? And then they are kind of criticized by the worst dictators on the planet. And that's how Mark looks fine. And they're saving themselves by this, reactive campaigns.
So I will actually pick up some key words from what you have mentioned before, and we were talking about disinformation, we were talking about the political influence of social media, and this brings me to the concept of hybrid politics, because we are noticing now in Moldova, but also in the Eastern European region, and not only in the Western Europe, is that we are in the middle of a hybrid politics concept which is taken over by political elites in order to promote their messages. And here I would like to also link it to the issue of regulations, because as Ms. Kogu mentioned previously, there are experts who are advocating for regulation, but also experts who are advocating against them. So if you could refer a little bit to this, and maybe we can hear your arguments on that issue.
Yep. So as for regulation, well, I believe in progress, and after we had radio, everyone thought that print press will die. After we had television, everyone thought that radio will die. Now we have social media, but we also have TV, radio, and all other means of media. So I guess it's partially about how we use this media. But the truth, I totally agree that the level of hostility is much more possible on social media. So there must be some regulations, and probably the first step to take is to enhance transparency. We see that after Facebook had its so-called data scandal, it took a few steps to make platforms as their Facebook pages more transparent. Now we see when they are created, we see how they were called before. Actually, referring to the case, if you suddenly notice that you are liking something that you remember you didn't like, there was this scheme on social media when you create multiple pages and then you can merge them. And when you merge pages, you choose the host page and all the other sub-pages that you may have liked as some lifestyle pages about tourism, about city, about history. They could be easily merged to a political party, and we saw it on social media. So Facebook took steps, it took down pages, it keeps taking them down. DFR Lab has partnership with Facebook, and before a takedown, Facebook gives us notice so we can learn what are the content strategies, content dissemination strategies on Facebook. We can learn from them, summarize them, put in public. These pages are gone to never return, and we learn from their malicious activities online. So there have been a few steps that Facebook has already taken, and I think it should move forward. For Twitter and Facebook also, they now have ad transparency tools. So we have historical data of what accounts, what ads they had. Currently it works mostly for political advertisements, and the drawback is that you need to define yourself as political advertiser that you can just ignore. So it doesn't eliminate all malicious activities, but again, I see it as a good step forward. Question is, what do we do with inauthentic impersonations, and should it be punishable? And here the main clash is between two principles: transparency and privacy, and how to find balance in between them. And I guess that's why we don't see any particular regulation created yet, because the balance between those two values haven't been found just yet. But I think the more we are debating, the more we are learning from what's possible, what are the digital strategies online, the closer we are to that.
It's a great question, as well as other questions. Thing is that I think, like, strategically, there are lots of technical things Facebook is showing it is trying to do. But Facebook and other platforms, they can't change their nature. They're commercial companies. And contrary to the traditional media, in these commercial entities, you don't have editor-in-chief of the front page, or the front person of these companies. Because we know who is editor-in-chief of a major newspaper in our country. Do we know name of the commercial director of that newspaper? No, because the reputation of a media depends upon reputation of the editor-in-chief. Do we know names of the people who are curating content on Facebook and Twitter? No. We know that they exist. Okay, if you go to Palo Alto and those meetings, you will meet some of them. But still, the front faces of these platforms are their owners. And this is still very big difference between media and platforms. It's good that they are recognizing their role now, finally, after the congressional hearings, after Russian stories, but still, for Mexican elections, Facebook had one of the best group of fact-checkers in that part of the world, Verificado group. So they contracted them to fact-check the content and pages. And when the Verificado group started reporting on the fakes, do you think Facebook closed down those pages with thousands of fakes? No. Because this is how they make money. They make money on those clashes. And they will not change. Well, unless they turn into non-profits, and I don't know, unless Mark resigns, or give half of his 60% share in the company to a non-profit. So the point is that the answer to this is regulations. This is a very wrong answer, because what we get instead in most of the cases as of now is attempts of the government to play the role, and in many cases, probably in Western Europe it's more or less okay, but in all other places this attempt will turn into another censorship. So the lack of control from the platforms will be replaced by the state censorship trying to, protect us all. And this is another threat. So that's why we are implementing action from the people. And this, of course, must be liberal people, and this must be definitely quality content. So involve the people, involve the independent liberal journalists and think tanks for the production of content. And yeah, involve the people in the distribution of that content and delivery of that content to their friends, because we trust our friends in the end.
Do you think that this is enough? Ms. Gogo, I would like to know your opinion on that.
Da, opiniile sunt diferite, vedeți și aici, unii pledează pentru reglementare, alții mai puțin pentru reglementare. Eu mă gândesc că în 2010, în 2011, am urmărit discuțiile și în rândul cercetătorilor. Știu că erau foarte puțini voci care pledau pentru reglementarea internetului la acea vreme. Păi bine că, uite, acum, la 8 ani distanță, situația este diferită. Mult mai multe voci sunt printre promotorii ideii de a reglementa internetul. Am văzut chiar petiții online prin care se vin cu anumite explicații și anume reglementarea merge mai mult pe partea de platforme sociale, rețelele sociale. Și apropo, și fondatorii acestei renumite rețele, avem aici în față simbolul Facebook, am văzut în ultimul timp, ei tot vin cu ideea că și ei consideră că guvernele ar trebui să reglementeze cel puțin câteva compartimente, da? Ceea ce ține de informația în timpul alegerilor, ceea ce ține de conținut dăunător, harmful, da? Ceea ce ține de protecția datelor. Deci ei consideră că aceste aspecte trebuie să fie reglementate de către guverne. Ei încearcă cumva să-și decline responsabilitatea, pentru că atunci când vorbim despre rețele de socializare, nu trebuie să uităm că există așa un cuvânt în engleză, accountability, responsabilitate față de societate, față de oameni, față de consumatori. Odată ce, poate că am să fac, nu știu cât de reușit o să fie acest exemplu, această paralelă între aceste companii mari, rețele de socializare, și o media online, o instituție din Republica Moldova, să zicem, da? Atunci când o instituție media online decide să-și includă rubrica comentarii și oricine are acces la aceste comentarii poate comenta oricare material care este publicat, atunci, volis nolis, această instituție media poartă o anumită responsabilitate în cazul în care, printre aceste comentarii, se vor regăsi comentarii care incită la ură, la violență. Deci, sunt multe cazuri când nu sunt acceptate, pentru că sunt contrarii legislației. Și dacă mass media vine și spune că, păi, noi avem atâtea comentarii că noi nu reușim să le moderăm, asta nu este o scuză, pentru că asta este responsabilitatea mass media respective, ori să modereze, să angajeze oameni, ca să le modereze toate, sau să nu ofere această posibilitate, pentru că în cazul în care, da, noi vorbim despre libertate de exprimare, deci avem pe de o parte libertate de exprimare, dreptul fundamental al fiecăruia foarte bine, pe de altă parte sunt alte drepturi și dacă prin libertate de exprimare noi facem abuz de ea și începem să promovăm anumite mesaje care sunt contrare legislației și încalcă drepturile altor persoane, atunci deja e marea problemă. Și în cazul în care există state, inclusiv în Europa, în Uniunea Europeană, care deja au introdus în legislație anumite prevederi contra rețelelor de socializare și ei sunt supuși riscului de a plăti amenzi uriașe în cazul în care nu elimină, nu șterg de pe rețele conținutul care este așa numit dăunător, înțeleg de ce acum atâta deschidere din partea anumitor fondatori ca să fie reglementat partea asta de către guverne. Cum spunea și colega puțin mai devreme, într-adevăr aici este teren de discuție, pentru că întotdeauna trebuie să vedem ambele părți și, cum se spune în jurnalism, adevărul e întotdeauna la mijloc. Soluții pot fi găsite. Sunt colegii din societate civilă, articolul 19, de exemplu, care promovează ca să existe o anumită structură de autoreglementare, pentru că ei pledează ca și în presă. Noi, de fapt, tot asta am vrea, să avem cât mai multă autoreglementare și mai puțină reglementare. Dar dacă nu este posibil, mergem și pe reglementare în anumite situații. Vorbim despre Republica Moldova. Noi anul trecut ziceam că ar trebui anumite prevederi în legislație, vorbim nu despre rețele de socializare acum, dar despre media online în general, prin care noi să fie obligați proprietarii sau fondatorii acelor instituții media online să publice informații despre acest, cel puțin să publice informații, pentru că noi nu avem la moment acum această informație. O parte din site-uri sunt create, nimeni nu știe cine este angajat, cine este director. Au fost cazuri când cineva s-a adresat în instanța de judecată pentru că nu era mulțumit, nu era considerat că a fost defăimat și instanța nu știa unde să trimită citația pentru că nu era nicio adresă indicată, nu exista informația asta nicăieri. Deci ce faci mai departe? Deci nu știi cine este, sunt niște anonimi în spate, nume, pseudonimi, deci asta e mare problemă. Deci oricum, încet cu încet se va merge spre reglementare, doar trebuie de găsit, cred eu, un echilibru. Să nu se ajungă ca în China, de exemplu, când stau și monitorizează discursul politic și dacă cumva ai folosit alt cuvânt sau ai expus o altă opinie și nu în linie cu partidul, deja riști să fii blocat cont sau să fii închis și acolo multe site-uri, multe rețele sunt blocate, dar la noi, cum ziceam puțin mai devreme, libertatea de exprimare este pe rețele de socializare, guvernul, administrația publică centrală nu face eforturi ca să limiteze, din contră, din câte vedem, deci chiar și angajații în instituțiile de stat fac treabă, în ghilimele, în timpul orilor de lucru.
Mr. Sreglow, how do we find the balance between regulating or not regulating, or how do we regulate with balance?
Tough question, regulation, because there are so many. We're coming from in a situation in Central Asia where the government so highly restricts and already regulates and exploits regulations and criminal code statutes to prevent freedom of expression. We still have criminal defamation on the books. I just got an email right before this panel that a journalist was just detained this morning that I know in Uzbekistan. And we see it often in places like Kazakhstan, even in Kyrgyzstan, we see this charge of the incitement of social, religious, inter-ethnic, religious discord, right? Which is another criminal statute that is often exploited and very broadly employed against various government critics. So we have a situation in which to talk about regulating the internet seems premature in Central Asia, although I'm also struck by an observation I made earlier, which is, I guess, when I think about civil society activists in the specific circumstances of fighting essentially a campaign for human rights online and criticizing the government, often the civil society activists in Central Asia, inside the region, and even those that are residing in exile, let's say the Tajik activists I know, they are vulnerable in ways that I think they're uniquely vulnerable, let me say, in terms of the social networking platforms, and I think that those things do need to be addressed. I mean, it strikes me that I've seen a lot of Uzbek activists, Tajik activists, sometimes outed as being gay, trolled, doxed, their personal information, their confidential addresses being revealed by highly sophisticated operations that are headed by the security services in those capitals. And it strikes me that Facebook, of course, they're thinking about the Rohingya and what they need to do is stop genocide. That's obviously at the top of the list. Is Central Asia at the top of the list? Absolutely not. And so there does need to be some attention that's paid to the civil society activists who are so, I think, so vulnerable, so few and far between in the most repressive regions. How do you do that, though, without encouraging overly broad restrictions by the government? I think that really is a tough balance. I think for the most part, as a human rights community, we should be constantly trying to hold the governments, all of them, accountable to obviously not ever interfere with the internet, unblock it entirely, drop criminal defamation charges, increase access to the internet. That is obviously really important, but I think we do need to go to the Facebooks, even Twitter now, and explain to them that there should be some resources. There should be ways that when the existing community guidelines are violated, when people are outed, or targeted in the ways they are, they need to have a method of contacting these companies. I think often I meet, activists in exile who are really disempowered. They have absolutely no idea. They say, I can make a complaint to Facebook, but by that time my whole life has been destroyed in 24 hours or even 5 hours online. So how do you combat those things when you're dealing with these operations of sometimes, as again I referenced this morning, a troll factory in Tajikistan? There's just a report on Radio Free Europe a few days ago that the government asks universities and the rectors of the universities to conscript professors and students to spend hours a day trolling government critics online, and doing whatever they can, cartoons, whatever it is. And there needs to be a method of sort of righting those wrongs, again, without impinging on free speech. I don't know if I'm actually answering the question or just skirting it.
Actually, yes, and I think that one important thing is also the stakeholders, and all of you have mentioned different stakeholders which are involved in the process. And my last question, and after that I will open the floor for discussion, is actually if you could refer more a little bit on which stakeholders should be involved in defending the digital space, and also if you could literally mention them, be it the government, the civil society, and what exactly should be their role in this?
So ahead of elections in Latvia, we had this so-called coalition established between civic society organizations and government body that was created especially for monitoring elections. And this collaboration, or well, it wasn't really collaboration, it was more like platform for information exchange and dialogue between civic society organizations and the governmental body. It was the state chancellery that organized this little institution at the time of elections, helped to coordinate election integrity efforts. It's very sensitive when government collaborates or wants to create discussion with media, because it's not the government's place to basically tell how and what should be reported and what should be ignored. But civic society organizations are a better actor to say help media to get their heads around what's the bigger picture behind the facts. So though I'm a defender of the truth and integral discussion, the truth is not the ultimate tool, in my opinion. It falls into wider narrative, and if journalists just report facts that are pitched to them via sometimes anonymous email addresses or through sources or secondary sources, and there is no filter or feeling of what's the bigger picture and how it influences bigger discussion, then these facts alone, though they are true and verified, can also bring some harm. So civic society organizations as think tanks are helpful actor in helping to protect election integrity. That's the particular case that we see how it worked. And other than that, of course, another stakeholder probably is social media platforms, though exactly they are businesses. And
Responsible social media platforms.
Responsible social, yeah. Again, they come from different standpoints, but the more discussions we have, the better. It's better to hear and really hear the other perspectives to find the middle ground and right solution rather than took sides and oppose each other and fight each other.
Thank you. Well, I'm against involvement of state bodies into transparent elections projects. And the reason for it is simple, that, well, you need to make sure that elections are okay in democracies too, like in developed, established, like liberal, consolidated democracies. But the thing is that the most important is to make sure that elections in non-democracies are okay. That when people are voting, that we can make sure that their votes are counted and the results are announced properly, and of course the pre-electoral campaign is okay, that people have equal access and candidates have equal access to the media, etc. And media are asking right questions and not only comfortable questions. But the thing is that in those cases, in the countries where government is more or less dictatorial and wants to influence elections or just set the results and falsified elections, it makes no sense to involve them in this. And in liberal consolidated democracy, this makes no sense too, because okay, elections are fine without the state. So no, I think it's.
So who should be the actors then?
Well, only citizens and only international community. Yeah, donors must still help fund it. Yes,
but
of course.
international community represents also states as well.
Well, definitely. It's a long discussion. I mean, well, you know, we Ukrainians, we have lots of issues with international organizations recognizing Russia as a state. I think that Russia is occupied by a terrorist organization, and so and all those international organizations, you know, recognizing Russian representation in their bodies as legitimate.
Definitely, this is a separate discussion.
Yeah. So let's not start it yet.
De acord cu acei colegi care consideră că societatea civilă are un cuvânt de spus în acest proces, dar eu cred că trebuie să fie și societatea civilă pe de o parte, împreună sau cu companiile care gestionează aceste platforme sau aceste rețele de socializare. Pentru că, de exemplu, iarăși, mă întorc la Republica Moldova, noi avem multe organizații ale societății civile care gestionează diferite proiecte și am ajuns cu cursul Educație pentru Media în școli, unde tot sunt incluse, apropo, anumite capitole legate de cum ar trebui să navigheze sigur, în securitate copiii pe rețele de socializare. În același timp, nu toți iau cursul ăsta și ar trebui, dar chiar și facem mai multe activități prin care să explicăm oamenilor cum pot să raporteze aceste cazuri când au depistat că este o pagină falsă sau o știre falsă sau conținutul este dăunător sau limbajul urii sau diferite aspecte, ca să trimită la Facebook sau la altă rețea, unde este acest conținut răspândit. Și din partea acestor companii, mai multă responsabilitate, ne zis că ar trebui să aibă reguli foarte clare și cât mai multă lume implicată în monitorizări și să reacționeze ori de câte ori sunt sensibilizați sau sunt atenționați că există conținut de felul ăsta. Dacă ar exista această, să zicem, autocenzură în interiorul companiilor, ar exista anumite coduri pe care utilizatorii, atunci când devin parte a rețelei, ei fac cunoștință cu aceste reguli, ei le citesc și le semnează cum ar fi, bifează că ei sunt de acord cu ele. Pe urmă, compania va avea mai mult pârghii ca să poată să elimine și nu fie acuzat că a încălcat anumite drepturi sau, iarăși, libertatea de exprimare, prin libertatea noastră de exprimare să nu afectăm drepturile altor persoane.
Și cu siguranță, ținând cont de aceste dezvoltări ale tehnologiilor informaționale, trebuie să existe și o cultură online pe care trebuie să o dezvoltăm și care cu siguranță trebuie să fie una obligatorie. Mr. Svetlo, what are the actors? Who are the actors?
Yeah, I mean, I may be the old-fashioned one in terms of like focusing on government so much, but I would say, and I think he's here in spirit, David Kay, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, is a key voice for striking that balance in a lot of these contexts. And he took a country visit to Tajikistan, which was immensely helpful from my perspective as a human rights activist. Having that standard setting coming from the UN Human Rights Council in what are, well, there are always turbulent times, but in incredibly restrictive and repressive times, I think you need leaders and champions of free speech to be touring the globe and pressing for standards. So I think, obviously, Dunja Mijatovic is a key voice on these issues. I think in recent days we saw Harlem Desir, the OSCE Special Representative for Freedom of the Media, really have an impact on Uzbekistan. They responded to his public call that they unblock the internet in writing, saying, yes, we heard you, we're unblocking these sites. So that was really key. I think in terms of I'm often calling on the U.S. to do way more than it does in Central Asia. I don't know if that's needed as much and can sometimes be counterproductive in Ukraine and Moldova or the Baltics, but certainly the U.S. government needs to step it up on free expression, standing up for the values it says it espouses, and making public statements when journalists are detained or when the internet is blocked. That's just not happening enough in Central Asia. We see a realpolitik coming from what should be the traditional voices for free expression, the EU and the US, so that needs to happen. In terms of other players, I'd say we haven't talked too much about China, Turkey, and Russia. Obviously, we don't want the incredibly sophisticated blocking efforts to take proxy servers offline that we see proliferating in Turkey to take over in Central Asia. It's starting to happen. Turkey is having a very, I'd say right now, a really negative impact on the space. Chinese technology that's used to surveil civil society activists is being transferred to these governments all the time. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization does a lot of damage in terms of free expression. I think that whatever we can do to push back on those trends, we should be doing. And so all those players, in addition to mentioning earlier, engaging with the tech companies, I think is going to be essential.
Thank you very much. And with this said, I would like to open the floor for discussion. Yes, please.
Okay, I have a question, and to go back to our overarching policy theme, I would ask especially Nika about the best policies, best practices in terms of digital approach and policies in this field. Probably less Steve about his region in terms of best practices, but if you have many, and if there are any examples in terms of Ukraine and Moldova as well.
Thank you. So I guess the advantage of our region in this regard is the size. What I mean by that is that if we see a hate speech or if we see a coordinated campaign, we usually notice it in a quite early stage, because people are small, there are less echo chambers, and the exchange of information flows faster. There have been cases when hate speech has been prosecuted, hate speech that was expressed online. There was also a case when a fake news harderer, he's now facing a trial. It's a little bit different. It wasn't political. The guy was curating so-called fake news site for money. And he published false news, like complete invention, that a supermarket collapsed. And because we had quite recent tragedy when it indeed happened, it caused public panic. Emergency services were involved and so on. So it actually resulted in some like real life consequences. Public money was spent on those false calls. And he's now facing trial based on legislation of like public peace disorder, like the same that you would use when someone calls for like fake bomb in a supermarket. So we don't have very like particular legislation that will regulate digital space. But this is, I'd say that the size of our nations help to really act on any malicious activities in timely manner and use existing legislation when it's really malicious.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? Oh. I think
Specifically as to combating hate speech? Or just in general? Well, because I would say that Central Asia is sort of worst practices on steroids. So it is difficult to isolate best practices from the region. I talk about, I think there are many lessons to be learned about so many of the pitfalls, as I mentioned, in criminal legislation. Maybe I want to go back to a point of inspiration or hope or optimism, cautious optimism, from what I'm seeing now in Uzbekistan, which I'm amazed. The country's coming out of a period of at least 11 hardcore years of isolation after the Andijan massacre up until 2016. And just in 2 years, we see a proliferation of Uzbek local journalist websites that are muckraking and exposing corruption in a way that is having a really positive impact. Sites like Kun Uz, I don't know if folks have heard about them, but they're leapfrogging over a lot of the exiled media. And I think that should leave us with a sense that actually there are a lot of possibilities. I think one of the best things that can be done is to have, again, all the international actors, but obviously the governments themselves, really having to commit publicly to the idea that criticism of the government is not only tolerated, but it's encouraged, that it's really essential to political, to economic growth, to political success. And that is starting to some degree happen in even, one of the most repressive countries on earth. So that gives me some hope that even in the places with the worst practices, you can get to something better.
Din păcate, noi nu avem în Republica Moldova cazuri când guvernanții ar încuraja presa care îi critică să-i critice în continuare. De cel mai multe ori avem reacții bolnăvicioase atunci când e vorba de materiale critice la adresa guvernanților, dar să nu uităm că aici în Republica Moldova avem și multe media care susțin guvernanții și promovează politica lor, așa că ei beneficiază și de critici, beneficiază și de laude, dar cumva suportă și aceste critici. Vorbind despre rețelele sociale, un caz mai recent, când noi am fost atenționați de către reprezentanți din comunitatea donatorilor că a fost creată o pagină pe Facebook, se numea tot Stop Pulse, pentru că noi avem o organizație care implementează un proiect, Asociația Presei Independente Stop Pulse, și au folosit multe și culoare și logotip și distribuiau informații corecte, care era adevărat, preluată de pe site-uri, inclusiv de la Centrul de Jurnalism, de pe alte site-uri, după care includeau și distribuiau multe informații false. Deci, s-a mers pe calea atenționării Facebook-ului ca această pagină să fie ulterior blocată. Cunosc colegi din societatea civilă care, atunci când au considerat că postările la adresa lor conțin limbaj al urii și promovează acest limbaj, ei tot s-au adresat la Facebook și aceste postări au fost eliminate, dar nu sunt atât de multe, totuși, cazuri. Eu cred că mai ar trebui să punem accent în continuare să spunem oamenilor cum pot utiliza aceste instrumente, cum pot să, atunci când nu sunt de acord sau când ei consideră că un anumit conținut le aduce atingere, pentru că e vorba de limbaj al urii sau alte lucruri care contravin legislației, să meargă să sesizeze companiile respective.
Mulțumesc. Does somebody want to answer the question still? No? Gina, please.
Gina Lentine from Freedom House. I'd like to ask the panel whether or not, and if, is it ever acceptable for governments to restrict access to online content or otherwise block it? And if so, what are those contexts? Thank you.
Who wants to be the first?
I believe that government shouldn't be doing that because it's creating wrong, it's creating bad precedent and wrong idea of what's the government's role in democratic society. The government should follow the rule of law. Hate speech is very well, it could be better defined, but it's well enough defined type of content that should be taken down, and the author of this content should face appropriate charges. But yeah, government should follow legislation that has been passed in a legitimate way. Yeah, so. In general, I'd say no, that's not the government's place, except for hate speech that's well defined in the international community.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll give example from Ukraine. Probably the biggest effect of, not the only, but the biggest, in the context of what we are discussing today, effect of Russia's war against Ukraine is that this gives a lot of bad people in Ukraine an excuse to do wrong things, to hide their profits, to excuse censorship, to implement terrible court decisions. And of course, states, they cannot be publishers of media, because then it's not media. And secondly, of course, they cannot censorship. They cannot censor. This is wrong. But in Ukraine, we have not only this problem of state censorship, we also have problem of unreformed court system. Lots of people are convicted now in Ukraine for Russian propaganda and pro-Russian activities in a very wrong procedure. Like our courts are not courts, basically. So they're inviting their independent experts, and court decision against people looking as if they're working for Kremlin, for terrorists. They are convinced using these expert decisions from this, basically their own local experts attached to these courts. If you have reformed court system, then yes, this can work. But if you don't have reformed and liberal state with separation of power and competitive court, then of course all the elements of the state, they will be used against freedoms. And that's how basically Putin is able to control us. He is just, bullying us. And our local corrupt leaders, they are trying to excuse their misdoings with this war. So, again, no, state must not be doing those things.
Eu consider că atunci când în legislație sunt prevederi specifice care oferă pârghii instituțiilor statului să închidă site-uri, să blocheze conținut online, atunci avem o problemă, vorbim de problemă, și sunt absolut de acord că există legi deja care sunt în vigoare, care conțin anumite prevederi legate de discursul de ură, de incitare la violență și multe alte prevederi care pot fi aplicate astfel încât să nu apară în legi prevederi scrise prin care să lase spațiu de manevră autorităților. Pentru că nu știi niciodată cum aceste legi, dacă vor fi odată adoptate, vor fi utilizate de către guvernanți, cu bună credință sau cu rea credință. Și noi, în ultimii ani, în societatea civilă, am mai avut acest dialog, nu zic altfel, se vorbește despre anumite prevederi la legislație prin care se încearcă, ar trebui să lupte cu pornografia infantilă și iată acolo era specific indicat că anumite site-uri pot fi închise în cazul în care 1, 2, 3 și societatea civilă atunci a reacționat și în continuare urmărim ca să vedem cum se formulează prevederile astfel încât să nu fie ulterior folosite așa cum înțeleg ei că ar trebui să le folosească. Pentru că, din păcate, trebuie să spunem, avem multe legi în Republica Moldova și conțin prevederi care pot fi interpretate, deci în funcție de cine le citește și cum le aplică. Deci avem o astfel de legislație. Nu putem să spunem că avem o legislație perfectă. Mai e mult de lucru la capitolul ăsta.
Yeah, the answer is no. Don't block the internet. I mean, how could I imagine that happening in California, where I'm from, for 24 hours, for a week? I mean, we saw that in Sri Lanka, right? That's the most recent example of efforts to protect vulnerable minorities, right? That may have been done with, a sort of proper goal in mind. But I think most often, at least in this region, post-Soviet space, often those instances of blocking go to the extreme and they really impede and they further endanger the public. So we saw, for example, the entire region of Gorno-Badakhshan, which is in southeastern Tajikistan, completely cut off for a month from the internet when the government was launching a law enforcement operation in 2012. And then basically every time President Rahmon does something embarrassing, they take YouTube down. He was singing at a wedding one day and it didn't go very well. And so I think, and so we have this periodic blocking of the internet. We now have Gmail, Google being taken offline in Tajikistan and other parts of Central Asia. And I think that is exceedingly dangerous. At the same time, as we've been saying, you have to protect minorities, and I think your points about hate speech are incredibly important. I also think about, again, as you said, there's sometimes good faith efforts to protect certain rights, but they can be handled in a way that is very dangerous to online expression. So for example, as I mentioned, in terms of the debate about Islam in Central Asia and the wearing of the hijab, that's coming up a lot in discussions online. Bloggers are talking about the school uniforms that have been introduced in Uzbek schools, in Tajik schools, and about whether or not women should be able to wear the hijab. There's a ban on the wearing of hijab, complete ban. And every time you see bloggers start to get active, the ones that are sort of pro-Islam start to talk about this, they're detained, they're taken offline. And I think this is being done, when we confront officials about this, they'll respond that, in fact, listen, Human Rights Watch, we're trying to protect women's rights. We're trying to prevent extremism. We're trying to ensure a democratic, secular separation of church and state, or Islam, or mosque and state. And those are legitimate objectives, but they have to be handled in connection and in concert with your human rights obligations. So I think I agree with my co-panelists on this question. Don't block the internet.
Thank you. So we still have time for 2 more questions. We have a question here, please. And please introduce yourself.
Valentin Curătoru, Internews. My question is actually for Mrs. Swerdlow. I'll ask in English so it's not lost in translation. You mentioned that there's actions undertaken that are counterproductive in the field of media, financed by the international community. Which are those actions which are counterproductive? And additionally, you mentioned this 1-point increase in index for a country like Tajikistan, while Moldova lost in the last 5 years 25 points in the World Press Index. Now, most of this rise to other countries in Central Asia might be just purely artificial, based on countries like Moldova losing so much. And how would you then quantify countries and stabilize this index so that it actually reflects development in the press index, and not just when some lose, others win? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I don't have in mind any particular international initiatives that have been harmful to media, if that's what you meant. I may have been talking again about just the way governments use the online space to go after activists, dox them, harass them. In the case of many women human rights activists I know, the sort of harassment they face online is so destructive, and I feel that we as a human rights community have to do more to protect our partners. And we need to bring that message to tech companies and Facebook and other platforms to come to their defense as quickly as possible. I think journalists as well are on the front line. So, but no particular programs that I would take issue with in the media sphere. I'm not an expert on that. In terms of the rankings, in contrast to my friends at Freedom House and Reporters Without Borders, Human Rights Watch doesn't compare countries. That's what we say. We don't have rankings. But no, they are obviously really helpful indicators. And I would agree with you, it's somewhat difficult to establish these rankings. But in the case of Uzbekistan going up, that was in relation to, again, the unblocking of the internet. One other really amazing thing that I didn't mention, but I think is relevant to this audience, is in the former Soviet space and in the world, the world's longest imprisoned journalist was released just last year. He was in prison for 19 years, an Uzbek reporter. I got to meet him a few months ago. And so it was those sorts of steps that were taken, which again, as I said in the beginning, are an outlier. Uzbekistan is sort of a feel-good story. The human rights, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, when I asked him, what are the countries that actually had some improvements in human rights last year, the 2 that he mentioned were surprising. They were Ethiopia and Uzbekistan, in terms of their political transformations and their opening. And let's just absolutely hope that whatever's happening there is going to continue, and the overall trends towards authoritarianism and crackdowns on human rights, which we see all over the globe. Obviously Trump's meeting with Orban yesterday, is on my mind. Let's just hope that doesn't infect Uzbekistan negatively. But I think we need to do a lot more work. Central Asia still stands apart as one of the worst regions for free expression.
Thank you very much. I think we had one more question there, the lady in the middle.
Bună ziua, Lidia Viziru, Consiliul Audiovizualului. S-a vorbit astăzi despre clonarea anumitor pagini de pe internet, am vorbit despre multe realizări în domeniul digitalizării informației, digitalizării însăși a procesului informațional. Și aici vreau ca experții să-mi răspundă la o întrebare. Ori clonarea acestor site-uri, mă refer la faptul care doamna Nadine Gogol a dat exemplu cu Stop False, nu este oare aceasta o invenție de a privatiza cenzura de către însăși cei care reglementează Facebook-ul? Ce părere aveți? Fiindcă mai nou apare în domeniul mass mediei terminologia de a privatiza cenzura de către cei, mai ales de către furnizorii media privați. Vă mulțumesc.
Eu personal nu consider că este o invenție a celor de la Facebook în cazul ăsta specific, pentru că după mine ar fi prea scumpă invenția. Ei, de exemplu, din câte cunosc în Facebook sunt acum în jur de 2 miliarde de conturi. 2 miliarde. Și ei au 10.000 de oameni angajați pe care îi plătesc ca să monitorizeze acest conținut și atunci când consideră că acest conținut nu este în linie cu anumite prevederi, cu anumite criterii, ei elimină. Deci sunt anumite date statistici care arată că ei fac anumite efort, dar cred că nu este suficient până la urmă în condițiile în care mai există și mai vedem cazuri de felul ăsta. Deci eu nu cred că aici poziția dumneavoastră e cea care e adevărată.
Anterior vorbeam despre cenzura din partea statului. Acum mai nou apare o nouă terminologie despre privatizarea cenzurii de către furnizorii privați. O cenzură intenționată a informației. La asta, de fapt, și mă refeream, nu acuzam Facebook-ul că ar fi făcut.
Eu am înțeles.
Zic, oare asta nu ar fi o invenție anume către a privatiza această cenzură?
Dumneavoastră considerați că Facebook-ul, ei singuri fac aceste falsuri și prin intermediul acestor falsuri arată că sunt falsuri, după care
ar putea cenzura un anumit context.
Nu sunt de acord.
Vă mulțumesc că am adresat o întrebare și așteptam un răspuns din partea experților.
Yeah, just a comment. So the intention of impersonated accounts could be different. We could see it as satire. For instance, we have a Pope Twitter account that is posting stuff, but the intent is clearly satirical to make sometimes a joke or whatever. And sometimes it is to impersonate someone and get traction on media when it's kind of really kind of inauthentic and sometimes malign attempt. And sometimes we see that someone just took someone else's identity because this person erased his or her social media profile, and this other person wants to be anonymous and creating completely different persona using image that belongs to the other person, but there is no history on the web about this person. So their impersonation is not straightforward use case for malign activities, though of course we care about it if it is malign. Therefore, I really doubt that Facebook creates fake accounts, because also then they need to keep some fakes that are satirical and are not harmful. No, I would just eliminate this theory.
Thank you very much. And with this said, we will finalize our Q&A session, and I would like our distinguished guests and speakers to address the final remarks. Maybe this time we can start with Mr. Sverdlov, please.
Well, I've learned a lot from my panelists. I just want to thank everybody. I mean, I think it's good to be on a panel with a troublemaker. I think we need more in my region. No, I think in terms of one thing that I think looking ahead will really need more in Central Asia is more synergy, more partnerships with with Ukraine, Moldova, Baltics. Obviously, Karina's an expert in media development over there, Internews. But certainly there's a great need for not just more trainings, but a lot of trainings in open source investigation, as you're doing. That's something that's completely new to my area. I continue to be worried about journalists in prison. There are still journalists in prison in my area, and I'd like to see us just, there's a lot of shiny new objects in terms of this discussion about disinformation and about Facebook, and sometimes it's a little easy to lose sight of the fundamentals. So I would just say, let's always continue to remember the core international human rights obligations that all states have to adhere to, which is to not penalize free expression, which is not to overly or too broadly apply these incitement charges. Criminal defamation should be ended. So I think those protections that already exist, the basics in international law for regular expression, should continue into the digital sphere and should be, in a way, updated and strengthened. And then once we have those in place, I think, or in parallel to that, looking at disinformation and combating all those threats, that's going to really require civil society to be empowered and strong and funded and supported in a way that it's not increasingly. Civil society activists all across this region, journalist outlets are closing, civil society organizations are embattled, funding is drying up for all of the local partners I work with, and that's a real problem. Where is that money going to come from? Where is that support going to come from in the future? The next 25 years of human rights activism, journalistic activism in this area is under threat. So whatever we can all do to support that, we should do. Thank you.
Trebuie să spun că am învățat și eu multe lucruri noi, în special ceea ce ține de situația din fostele state sovietice din Asia, pentru că noi cunoaștem lucruri mai în general, stăm mai bine la capitolul ăsta în sensul statelor parteneriatului estic, pentru că mai facem proiecte comune, ne comparăm între noi, deci din statele parteneriatului estic, ca să vedem cum stăm la indicele libertatea presiei, libertatea de exprimare și acum câțiva ani Republica Moldova sta foarte bine, noi eram printre lideri, locul 1 sau 2, periodic, câțiva ani la rând am evaluat acest indicator. Păi eu acum, după ce am aflat mai multe detalii despre ce se întâmplă în fostele state din Uniunea Sovietică din Asia, frică mie să nu ajungem în câțiva ani ca Uzbekistanul deja să stea mult mai bine la capitolul libertatea presiei și alte lucruri decât Republica Moldova, ținând cont de ceea ce avem noi la moment aici. Și colegii au menționat, apropo, aceste căderi din ultimii ani care se fac în clasamentele internaționale, Reporteri fără frontiere, Freedom House, deci sunt evidente. Eu sper să nu ne ducem în următorii ani și mai jos, cel puțin să ne oprim și să începem să creștem. Asta e speranța mea.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity, and I learned a lot from this panel. And I'm keeping learning from lots of countries. I'm especially thankful to the organizers of this event to Estonia. I'm a big fan of Estonia. I think that the reason that we are implementing our service and building our company in Estonia now is one of the answers to the question, how do you fight against disinformation and bad media policies? Because you need good environment for that. And not only environment for freedom of speech, but environment for business development. You need to, be able to host people, companies, and not only our company, but hundreds of them, because most of startups, they fail. So you need to be able to provide that environment for all those guys trying and girls trying to build something which would undermine such giants as Facebook, Twitter, and others, and make them work better, of course, because competition is the final answer. Because users now, they kind of, I'm still using Facebook a lot, but lots of my friends, they feel like, I'm gonna leave it, but still, you know, lots of friends are there. We are keeping, you know, talking on this platform. So, and the reason for that is just there is no competition for that. So please help fact checkers, help them develop their content, and help them describe their content, because all those platforms, they can work only with properly described quality content. So we need to help fact checkers not only develop their content projects, but also describe their content with formats readable by other projects. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the panel. The main takeaway is how different so-called post-Soviet environment is nowadays, and the starting points where we are at now. For instance, in the Baltic states, their resilience to everything Russia is very strong, and nationalism was seen as a way to actually keep the resilience. While nowadays we see populist parties rising and nationalists taking anti-immigration narratives up, which redefines it as different tools. So this is just another context to consider when we are talking about how to probably steer discussions online, and what stakeholders should be involved, and what values we should keep in mind when discussing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nika. And concluding the discussion of our panel, I must mention that defending the digital space around election is practically an utmost importance issue. But of course, the debate on how we will do it will still continue. And I would like to thank you very much for your presence here, and to thank very much the speakers for very interesting answers, and to wish you good luck with this event further on. Thank you very much.